Hello, everyone, and welcome to Theory into Practice. Today, it's a happy, sad day for me because we are talking with somebody who I might not get to actually bring onto the show again in the same capacity because she's retiring. Carol Cwiak, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Dan. It's so good to be with you.
And it's so good to be with you. And we just spent 22 minutes. I'm looking at the time, 22 minutes talking before we hit the record because it's always to me, and I told you this is very selfish of me not wanting you to retire and not wanting you to step away from EM, but it's always such a great opportunity for me to just be able to engage in a conversation. But we just spent 22 minutes, and it felt like 2 minutes catching up, seeing what we were doing, all the good stuff that's happening, some of the bad stuff that's happening as well, or some of the things that could be bad to the profession. You're very passionate about what we're going to talk about today, so I'm not gonna sugarcoat anything today. We're going to talk about the things that are happening in the industry right now, especially as it revolves around the Emergency Management Institute changing its name. So let's go right into that, Carol. Before we do that, though, I'd like to give you a chance to just tell people quickly who you are, why you're retiring and leaving us behind, which is it's obviously a good story. But more than that, why are you so passionate about the name change of EMI?
Dan, retired from NDSU. My official retirement date, I think, was like May 15th, but have been wrapping up a few projects at the end of that. The bottom line is it was time and I needed to focus on other things. I've told people I'm stepping away from EM, except where my specific expertise is absolutely needed and where I can really contribute, which is the professionalization discussion, obviously. You know what happens when you age. And as I was mentioning to you before, 9 years, almost 10 years ago now, I had a traumatic brain injury and it pretty much changed the whole world for me and shifted it on its axis. And with that, I came to understand many more things about what priorities were. I had to slow down dramatically. So if you think I've been going quickly, you should have seen me 10 years ago. Oh my God, I was a monster. I just never stopped. So there are many factors that come into it, but also I have grandkids, time flies, all those things are important to recognize as you age, there's only so much time in a life. And as much as I love EM, I needed to have some additional space. That's why I retired from NDSU, love NDSU, miss my colleagues. They're back in classes this week. I didn't have to write a single syllabus. It did not break my heart one bit. I'm happy to be here chatting with you today. It's delightful to have these types of discussions. They're soul filling. Let's talk about FEMA's new engagement. Let me say at the outset that there is no bigger supporter of the Emergency Management Institute than me. I adore the Institute. I talk about it all the time. Its value. It is so important to the training mission. They are the premier training facility in the United States, well, anywhere, but okay, they're the premier training facility. They are a key element of professional development. The EMPP program, the Emergency Management Professional Program, is essential to professional development. There are other programs like MAP and the new planning program, that those are key programs to helping people advance in their career and exercise, all the exercise pieces, all of the outreach, all of those programs they're doing there are essential. Awesome. Not a negative thing to say. Also, when EMI Anywhere came out, it had a number of things that were related to it. I support all of those but one. And my story is also the story of many EM high ed folks and many practitioners. And that is the rebranding of EMI to, first it was going to be National Emergency Management College. That's where it started. And Jeff Stern rolled those out. And all due respect to Jeff Stern, I think he has a vision and he's trying to create that. But that immediately hit conflict with the folks that heard it. What are you talking about? College, because college means something, right? So long story short, that initiated almost 3 years of conversation from the time the idea was introduced with high ed partners, practitioner partners, groups that have interest in this area. And the bulk of it was basically, can we come up with another name? For instance, if you wanted to rebrand EMI, could it be the National Disaster and Emergency Management Institute, which stands for something different than college or university? And frankly, to me, is a more esteemed kind of mission because it's a gathering of knowledge and understanding, right? So to me, institute was good. Okay, apparently not everyone thought that. First, you start with college. It was at the High Ed Symposium in June that the administrator got up and basically broke the news to the high ed community. And I'm paraphrasing, and so I hope I'm not misrepresenting, but basically the way it was put to the high ed community was that the FEMA felt like the local state, the folks that they were working with, were not able to meet the call, and that point of failure was damaging FEMA's efforts. That's what was received. I don't know if that's what she intended, but that's how it came across. And so, of course, the high ed community in the room were like, what the heck? I don't think that was the exact words, but what the heck is what I'm going to use. So, what the heck? Did she just disparage us? And I don't really think she intended to disparage us. I get where FEMA's coming from. They build tons of things. They're great at capability building. Honestly, there's no one better at capability building than FEMA. I will give it to them every time. They build great stuff, but they don't understand why it doesn't get used, and they don't understand why it hits the skid sometimes. And we understand what that is. That's because there's a lack of capacity. I will have to get back to that part so I don't get derailed on this particular topic, but remind me, Dan, to get back to capacity. So what happens is we have this whole thing. There's tremendous pushback. People are writing to senators. I put up the overview and such on a petition so people could read all the facts. Samantha Montano was writing about it, but there's all kinds of stuff. I guess at Hazards, there was tons of discussion about it. I wasn't at Hazards, but all of these things are happening. And there's just a lot of discontent around not the ideas, not the restructuring, the college and or university. So when the administrator rolled it out, the name had been changed to the National Disaster and Emergency Management University. That was worse than college. But all injuries being equal at this point, it was still the same issue. Why is this problematic is really the question, right? Every time I post about it, people are like, this is great. This is free. And we don't want to pay money. And I went to a high ed program and it was horrible. So this is way better. Okay, there's a number of things in here that we need to unpack. Number one, what does high ed do? High ed isn't there to teach you everything about capability. High ed is there to give you this foundation, a broad-based foundation, so you can understand the complexities in emergency management. Yes, and some of the structures, but it isn't all things applied, and it never should be. There should be internships, practicums, there should be mentoring, all those things should happen, but you don't get out of college unless you are some kind of a superstar and just go into practice like, oh, I am all that in a bag of chips. That's not a thing. You go to college to get that base. And the point of that base is to create folks who don't have to learn this stuff on the job, these basic understandings, because that's painful and it is not an easy way to learn. So that's what it is. The high ed piece, which was started over 20 years ago, maybe it's even getting closer to 30 at this point, that high ed piece was created to change the trajectory for emergency management, to bring disaster costs down, and to help professionalize. That's why it was created, because we know what happens with professions. To be a profession, you have to have a specialized body of knowledge, right? And you have to have people that have a mastery of that and people that are contributing to that. So high ed is really on that side, gathering the body of knowledge and giving folks the basic input for that. And then those schools have to be accredited based on whatever your artifacts are in your field. So ours are code of ethics, and people would have to abide by professional standards, those basic things. So you go from Okay, we have a field that's interested. Okay, now we have an education base that's building the body of knowledge that kind of informs our things we do from a scholarly perspective and what it looks like boots on the ground. And then we go to, let's have all those institutions accredited at the EM level, not just regular accreditation, and EM specific. So then we know that the people coming from these colleges and universities have met a standard, which is the important part that isn't happening yet, which is why some people really, I think, have a lot of, I can't speak against other institutions, I don't know, but some people have not had good experiences. Accreditation will clean that right up, I guarantee you. So there's that. And then you go from that, you can go to licensure. And let me just say to everyone who's ever listened to me about this, who is just hearing it right now for the first time, there is no way that seasoned EMs are going to be tossed to the sidewalk when licensure occurs. There has to be a time from the time accreditation starts at the high ed until they actually say you need to come from a credit school. There has to be a period there because you have to accredit a bunch of people, institutions, and get people through them. So we are talking about a decent period of time. And everybody before that needs to be grandfathered in because you're just going to agree to abide by the Code of Ethics and Professional Standards, which, news tip, was actually created, blessed, vetted in our community. It's not, oh, some brand new idea. It's all the things we value already. That's what the Code of Ethics and Professional Standards is. It's all the things about who we are. It's basically telling people on the outside who we are. Let's just put that to bed. If you're like, you know what? I'm not going to go back to school and do all those things. I've been practicing. I know all this stuff. That's what you do. You don't need to go back. That's not what this is about. I'm sorry to say it, this is about power. Professions have power over themselves. And that power sounds like an ugly word. And I know people have consternation about it, but I'm sorry. I'm tired of hearing stories about emergency managers trying to do the good work they do and being shut down or derailed by somebody who knows nothing about emergency management, who is a supervisor or a mayor or whoever. I don't want to disparage every position in America, but there are people who insert themselves into the practice of emergency management and override seasoned emergency managers' decisions, judgments about issues, and then put others in harm's way. And this is what causes emergency managers to lose their damn minds, frankly. And it causes folks to leave the field out of sheer frustration. So that is really what professionalization is going to do. It's going to allow us to do the things we know need to be done and give a protective shield around emergency management to be able to say, we know who we are, we know what we do, we know what the right answers are, because we are licensed professionals. This is a profession. We have the specialized body of knowledge. We have this. You don't. You have to trust us in this situation. We know how to manage this risk. So that's what professionalization is. What happens now with the FEMA university concept is that inserts itself like in this professionalization march this way. And aside, I'm going to tell you there's one thing that is obviously a challenge. Anytime the federal government, which is a government, is inserting itself into what the prescribed knowledge base is, and this is not to say that FEMA is not lovely, and I have tons of friends in FEMA, what's happening is it is going to be fickle. Because government's fickle and it changes with political ideologies, the focus on things changes, the funding of things changes. We're right in a very contentious political period here in the United States. So we know better than anyone that this is not some kind of fallacy. Political will changes, political interest, political ideology. So we had to be very careful. And I've always said this long before this, for the university idea arose. FEMA is not who we should be looking to set our path. FEMA is a partner, one partner. They are part of us. They are part of our collective. but they don't set the path for emergency management. They do set the path for the things in their control. Here's how you get this money. Here's what we expect you to do if you want to play in this playground. Those types of things. Fine. That is typical of federal funding. There's always some path. They get to set the path if it's their money, but they should not be setting the path for professionalization. Not because they don't have brilliant people, not because those people may not be not because they aren't dedicated, but because the emergency management as a profession must represent all of us, all of us, all of our experiences. It has to be an organization. When you become a profession, the licensure and such is managed by an organization that isn't an advocacy organization. It isn't a government organization. It stands alone and uses represent EMs in there to manage it, to actually create and maintain excellence. That's what we do with those organizations. So FEMA should not be doing these things to begin with, even though I would give FEMA, again, every prop for the capability development they've done, which has been nothing short of amazing. With the university, it cuts sideways because it starts to interfere with other colleges and universities in the United States. And people say, oh, they're not going to grant degrees. First of all, we've heard mixed messages about that. At high ed, Jeff Stern, the EMI superintendent, said they were going to start, but they weren't going to seek accreditation for a few years. And I will tell you, the accreditation, that language is basically set high ed people's hair on fire, because you don't seek accreditation unless you're granting something. That's typically the situation. So I am of the camp that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether he grants degrees or not. What happens is, and I'll just use an example, if you have a national disaster and emergency management university and you are wanting to offer emergency management higher education program at college or university, what you have to do is scan the landscape to see what's offered, to see if you have a place you can fit. Good luck to some of the NDSU. I don't think is going to be profoundly affected, but good luck to these places that are competing for students. When those students, whether the students understand all the dynamics or not, or whether administrators understand all the dynamics or not, the perception is students can go to the free university and it's FEMA's university, which has got to be way better than your old college that has 100 degrees and FEMA only focuses on 1 degree. And also, if I'm a kid and I want to do emergency management, sorry, I'm going to the FEMA university, right? Because I'm not going to pay. I'm not going to pay. And then it's FEMA. And what we know of FEMA, the way perception of it from the outside is it is the everything in emergency management. Now, in practice, we know it's not the everything because lots of people pounding the beat out there doing all the things, right? And very rarely engage with FEMA. So this is not I'm not saying FEMA is all that, but that is sometimes the perception. So it will dramatically change the education market, which will, I believe, start to derail some of that accreditation issues and such. Also, now you have dictation of the education coming through a federal government venue, which I already told you, they're fickle. And this is, again, not to disparage any of the brilliant people. It's like when your boss is in the administration of the White House and they say, oh, you're not doing that, or you're doing something else, that does make a difference. So that's where it comes in. There's a lot of other challenges that happen with this as well, as far as professionalization and the integration between, even if FEMA were able to integrate folks, if you've ever worked with FEMA or with FEMA folks, what you know for sure is FEMA folks are very limited in what they can say and do before they get in trouble. They don't get to speak without approval. I'm overgeneralizing. I'm sorry, we can't do a press release unless it's gone through legal. There's a lot of dynamics that would completely change the growth and possibility of emergency management and would essentially make us a government asset in a way that, although we work with governments, would be much more limiting potentially nationally than it is currently. So that's just a couple of the things that, I mean, trouble me with that. There are other things that you can read about in that. I've posted things about it, and I have a whole list of things that talk about other issues. But just for the purpose of this conversation, which is right now just a monologue for me just going on, let me just say that's the key issues. It is going to interfere with professionalization. And when you interfere with professionalization, you interfere with the power that goes to the emergency management practitioner community. And that is what offends me. That hurts me because our emergency management practitioner community, which is my personal love, needs to have the power to do the things it knows need to be done and to not be interfered with by people who are, I call know nothings, who just want to insert themselves. So I can't abide by people who I think they're doing good things, but they really are causing harm, because I understand the implications and what it's going to mean to emergency management practice as a whole. And it will hurt us, even though it sounds bright and shiny. It's going to have implications that are far reaching.
I don't even think, for me, everything you said is right on. But for me, I don't even think it sounds nice and shiny, because I've been going to the Emergency Management Institute for 10 years. And for 10 years, we've been told that they don't certify anybody. They don't offer certifications, degrees. They have partnerships where some of their classes can be given college credit, or you can get a college degree through a different institution, but never through them. And and for 10 years, it's what we've been told. We don't do this, we don't do that, we don't do this. And there's so many limitations from the government that, as you mentioned, that there's things that they can't do. And then to just come out and say, hey, we're going to be a university is honestly, it is so confusing and a little bit arrogant to be able just, we're going to be a university. Ultimately, for me, it wasn't to say you're going to be university is a bad thing. It was to say that we are now going to be a university. It's not, we are working towards becoming a university. We're going to do all these things to become a genuine, accredited, ultra value driven organization. No, we're just changing our name to say that we're a university. So they're not a university. They're not going to be accredited for anything. They're changing the name to make it appear that it has more credibility than it does. The Emergency Management Institute in itself has enough credibility. It drives great curriculum. It has great instructors. It has the students that go there come out knowing new things. There are new students going over and over. They're always putting out new programs. As you mentioned, the Emergency Management Professionals Program and the Planning Practitioners Program, and there's the MEP, the Master Exercise Practitioner. These are all great programs, but they're not certifications. Even many of us would like them to have been at the time, because we could. But ultimately, just knowing we went through the program that means something. But to say that, oh, now we're a university, what does that mean to moving forward, and what does that mean to everything that we've done in the past? I think it's definitely, I don't want to say complete overreach, but at the same time, it's complete. They jumped the gun, like they completely, like they they they're 10 years ahead of where they needed to be. If they would have just said, if they could have said, come out and, as you just, number one, incorporate the community in which you're saying you're going to serve. They didn't even do that. They just said, we're doing this thing based on one person's initiative, and that person could be there or be gone tomorrow. And then based off of the government and administration and all that other good stuff. There are so many limitations to it. And I don't personally, I'm not an academic professor, although I work in the academic realm. But it's at the same time, it's to say, how is that really going to interact with those that are teaching or are professors or do have programs? We see these programs struggling already as we continue to establish ourselves as a profession, and we continue to move forward with everything we're doing. We're in every year, we feel like it's a little bit step forward. I feel like this can actually dampen that as well, as you mentioned, because as you said, if there's a university, go do that. Now, if there's a higher demand for that and there's less capacity, less capability to actually perform the duties in which you say you're going to do, that just leaves another problem, because now more and more people are going to say, what about this? I can go there. Then there's less classes that are offered right now, the way things, you're going to need more money to fund those classes when they're already struggling. And if the government shuts down, the university now shuts down. So that is a problem for me. So
Yeah.
anyway,
God, you just
Uh,
gave me 18 other things to think
well,
about.
that's just where I'm at. I think the idea itself is a great idea. I do. I think the concept is wonderful. I think that the intentions behind it are pure, but the timing and the way it's done is very poor, and
Yeah,
that's based on poor leadership as well. Whether you feel passionate about that initiative or not, the fact that you did this in the timing that you did it, with where you did it, and how you did it, poor leadership, poor execution. So I don't agree with that at all. But I think the overall concept was great. We wanted to move that direction. As students, I wanted to know I was moving that direction, and the organization I valued so highly was moving that direction. But to do it the way they did it and are doing it is wrong. But
yeah,
let's move to that. Let's move to that capacity and that
okay,
capabilities that you
yeah,
wanted to talk about, because that is a big deal. Because right now you got so much funding to go around, because it's, and as you mentioned, it's free. People are going to think it's free. Well, it's not free to the
mhm,
individual. It's free, but it's not
yeah,
free. The government pays for this
mhm,
based off of funding that's allocated, and
mhm.
allocation is actually decreasing every year. So what does that mean to the people who want to go now to this university? So that is a problem for me. When
Okay.
classes itself, you can't even get the class that you want to get into because they can't offer it because they don't have enough money to fund it. That's capacity, right? That's capability of actually being able to perform what they say they're going to do. So let's talk about that. How does that incorporate into what we're doing? We're supposed to be doing.
We should be talking more often because you just get me so fired up, Dan. Okay, let me just start with this one thing you mentioned, and let's just even talk about when you impact high ed, you impact the body of knowledge, which kind of stymies your professionalization efforts as well, because it will no longer be able to be contributed to. Because the benefit of faculty in institutions, particularly tenure based institutions, is that you're writing and publishing as part of your expectations. And so that in and of itself would take a hit. The capacity, I've just recently wrote a white paper on capacity and capability with one of my students, because I had this moment where I just could not reconcile any longer how many amazing things FEMA could build and really spend time on, and then their frustration with where it met capacity. And I think that what happens is, can we create a better prepared, better informed emergency manager? Sure, absolutely. It takes time if from a person's schedule. And when you only have a half-time person or a one-person shop, that person didn't have the time to give. Even if you have two people, you don't have the time to give. So that has been a strain for us, and it continues to be a strain. My suggestion to FEMA is always, and of course FEMA doesn't want to hear this, my suggestion is push to these jurisdictions that don't have capacity and allow them to build capability. So give them capacity so they can build capability. And then in that, theoretically, what you're doing is creating a stronger workforce that can make the argument for better funded programs. I mean, and that's where I think FEMA should be putting their money. I understand somewhere along the line, FEMA lost faith in the local and state emergency management teams. I get it. Okay. I think that's what happened, but it's not, I'm not going to say it's their fault. I'm sorry. The local and state, they're hired into positions that are no low paying positions or given a limited number of hours to do the job. They don't have any support in those spaces. And then they're asked to do 100 things. And FEMA has quite a list if you want their stuff, right? It's not easy. Engagement with FEMA is not like your easy first date, okay? It is like a 30-year marriage. It is a very different phenomenon. I think this capacity and capability thing, understanding what's happening with that, understanding how essential the local and state level emergency management teams are, and private sector as well. Hello. Private sector, you're lucky if you get yourself a BC/EM person in there. And then we're increasingly seeing some really powerful EM background folks move into those spaces. That makes me happy. But those programs, they're lacking. You don't have enough people to create this nirvana that FEMA is preparing for. And I think they believe that by putting in this university that they'll be able to do it. They just keep throwing more capability because that's what FEMA does and they do it well. So let's do more capability. No, we're drowning in your capability. We need the capacity in emergency management. We need the people. So I feel like we all understand the capacity issue. And I feel the rub is in FEMA saying it's not our job to do the payment deals of having the people at the local and state level. That's not our job. I think that's accurate. It isn't their job. But if you continue to hit a point of failure with your capability, the thing to do is to not create your own university. It's to fund the capacity so people can take in your capability. That's my point with their capacity capability thing. The capacity issue is also something that could start to be remedied with professionalization. When you say, I'm sorry, this area of risk, the most complex, diverse risk portfolio of any field, I'm telling you, I challenge someone to tell me one that is more complex or diverse. Emergency management. We deal with lives, livelihood, quality of life, property, right? All the things. Doctors, they deal with your health or sometimes the public health. Lawyers, they deal with your freedoms and sometimes property, whatever their issues are. We're dealing with a big, giant circle of things. And these things are, as we apply them, we're applying them to a community, but every single unit in that community is potentially a different unit. What's interesting, Dan, I was thinking the other day, before I started in emergency management, before I knew anything about emergency management, I would see things and I'd see, oh, so-and-so evacuated, but these people didn't evacuate. And I would say, oh my God, why not? Why wouldn't you evacuate? And then when I became a scholar, I realized that WHY, even though small, had 1,000 things packed in it. And that's really the crux of the complexity in emergency management, right? It's not like we can't create structures or systems. It's not like we can't potentially teach folks what to do. But the dynamic part is all those people that you're serving, the dynamics of those people with their environment, the dynamics of those people with the economy, with all the systems we live in. The complexity of emergency management is off the charts. Don't people want to say, oh, emergency management, what is it? So basic. Oh my God, there's nothing more complex than emergency management. That's the struggle. There's nothing more complex than emergency management. Okay, yes, capability is good. We don't have capacity. We want to say it's at the local level. Guess what? When failure happens at the local level, FEMA, guess who has to come in? You. Guess who has to pay? The federal government, which means who pays? If you're going to pay, let's just talk mitigation. Let's save some money. Let's invest in some capacity building at the local level for a while. And you can put all that great capability you have to work then. And then let's test and see if our outcomes improve in those areas and if the funding the federal government has to supply is decreased, which is really the goal that I think, as I said in the beginning, that was the FEMA high ed program's mission in part was to reduce disaster costs by doing this education piece. And that really is part of that equation. Dan, this is part of why I love talking to you, but also part of why I retire, so I don't lose my damn mind and just get crazy about these things. It's these things where it's very frustrating to see that there are better paths we could be on in supporting emergency managers. The practitioner community at all levels is frustrated. FEMA's frustrated, the state is frustrated, locals are frustrated, private sector people are frustrated. We're all frustrated because we don't get the respect, we don't get the funding, we don't have the capacity, and we can't take advantage of some of the amazing capability opportunities that we have to further develop our capability. We're all frustrated, but the ways in which we deal with this will be defining, and they will either be the strengthening of emergency management or I don't want to see the death knell because we will never die completely, but the further depression of the potential of emergency management to do effectively the work it does. That's what I think is coming if we're not careful.
I think for me, one of the things is I don't feel like we have enough of a shared voice. It's for me, like there's so many, this person's doing, this person's doing that, this person, or I should say department or organization or whatever, right? However it is, there's not enough of that shared partnership, collaborative voice that says that are saying the same thing. Everybody's saying something different. And that's what's so frustrating and it's infuriating, really, because ultimately it delays us even more. And if we were all saying the same thing at the same time to the different people, I mean, we would be so much further along, and we could still make such an impact if we were to change that now. If we were literally all working together towards the same mission, which is professionalization of the emergency management, proper funding and proper allocation of resources. So in understanding that as we can get more people in the role that are qualified, more people that are fully qualified, that are actually doing the job at a full-time level versus we talked a little earlier and you said something about a quarter level individual doing it. That's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous that we don't have full-time individuals doing these. We don't have teams in these organizations doing these things. When you got one person, you stretch them to their fullest capabilities, and past that, how do you expect anything to really get done? And then when you have advocates all having their own personal agenda and saying different things to do different, it just doesn't make sense if we can't come together with ultimately a collaborative shared voice to make and aiming for the same vision. You have so much division everywhere right now, but we shouldn't be divided in this. This is like an area where we should all be on the same page, no matter what our beliefs are. We should be on the same page of what emergency management should be, how it should be conducted, who should be conducting it, and how it should be properly allocated for. I think if we could get more of that, more partnerships, more collaboration, the better the profession would be, the faster it would grow, the faster it would legitimize in a lot of places. But as you mentioned with FEMA, that ultimately they put out a lot of great content. They don't just, but they have zero distribution. So nobody knows about it, and and then they put so much of it out that it overwhelms people. So that people just forget. They're like, it's too much, so I don't even want to look at it. So there's so much stuff, and if it was done in accordance, if we had a system in place where it was done, FEMA would be a great voice to have to say we have to do these things, but we have to be the ones doing the things as a practitioner. But if we had more of a system in place that it was all the same message, doing the same things, the same system, we'd be in such a much of a better position overall as an individual doing the job, as a profession moving forward. But a lot of it too is like if I tell, like, as an individual doing the job, I'd say we got to do these things. They're like, where does it say we have to do those things? Because you got to fight against that. It says here that we got to do these things. That's a recommendation. That's not a requirement. If you want funding, it is. So there's so many hoops that we have to jump through because like you said, you can get me going, you get me riled up too. It's just a lot that we have to navigate every day. And it seems like there's no support system in place to back you up or to support you when you're actually doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing. And it definitely hurts us moving forward. It slows us down. And in some cases, it sets us back.
That's a great point. The point, what you're making is the point for the power of professionalization, right? The support it gives you, the structure it gives you to say you are the expert in the room, and Dan knows what Dan needs to know, and Dan's telling us what needs to happen, and Dan's telling us what we need. That's what professionalization, becoming a profession, and having the hallmarks of monopoly, authority, and autonomy are going to give emergency management. We need it for that. Let me speak to your speaking in one voice thing, because I have come to recognize that the vast majority, and 90% or more of emergency management folks, are all service. They have servant hearts. They're all about serving. They're out there trying to do everything they can in every which way. I see it over and over again. Bless their hearts, which is why so many of them cannot retire. They're just serving. But there are increasingly in emergency management, something I've noticed is something I call climbers. So contributors and climbers, and the contributors, all these service people are doing these things and really thinking about things and what is the right thing to do and how do I navigate these spaces. But, and this is not uncommon for any field, that there are climbers. The climbers are people who want to get ahead and will make, and again, politics is part of EM, I'm sorry to say, it just is, will make relationships and commitments that sometimes take away from our best interests. And so I would say to all EMs out there, this is not a matter for you to fix, but a matter for you to recognize. There are always going to be people trying to climb up to positions of power that will make decisions that maybe aren't in the best interest. And as the other 90%, you have to hang together to protect from those types of things. Because the reality is, and this is FEMA right now doesn't have money to pay for their disaster stuff. I mean, we're doing a university over here. Look, it's open. This is nice over here, but we're not paying for the things we need to be paying for. That's what we need FEMA for. We really need FEMA for that. So it's about really understanding the things that are going to be important to emergency management and hanging together on that. And the bottom line is the work you do is important. It is essential to your community, your business, your organization, essential. And if you don't do your job well, or you weren't there, that community, business, organization is at greater risk of being harmed. We are risk management professionals at the end of the day. And in a risk society, we're at the top of a food chain because our management of our portfolio is so expansive. So come on now. We all know our mission. We're important. And when I don't mean us, our work is important. And we need to band together on that concept. You don't have to band together on exact little things that you do, just on the main mission that we are doing important work that affects people's lives, livelihoods, quality of life. That work needs to be elevated and protected from interference, political interference, climber interference, any kind of interference. It needs to be prioritized in everyone's budget from the local level up, and the expertise needs to continue to be nurtured in our field as we professionalize. We can solve the world's problems here, Dan, if only others would be listening and coming along with us.
100% agree. And the more and more they throw on, or even think about, consider throwing on the emergency manager and the emergency management capabilities or functions that they want us to jump in and fix or to manage, the more we need professionalization, more individuals, more budgeting, more qualified people entering the field as well. So that brings it back to the actual universities giving degrees to people who are going to go into the field and learn to do the job and want to do the job correctly and have this foundational knowledge to do that. We've been going an hour now. I know we could go a lot longer, especially on this subject. It's always a great pleasure to talk with you, Carol. I'm saddened to know we will be talking less and less as you move away, but I'm very happy for the reason that you'll be moving away from EM in a form, being able to spend more time with your family. You said you're writing a play or a musical, not just a play, a musical. So
a musical.
I love it. I love what you're doing. I love the reason you're doing it, and it's 100% deserved. Thank you so much for everything you've contributed to the emergency management profession, to the emergency management professional, and thank you so much for the passion that you have in serving the emergency manager as an academic. In that, I want to turn it over to you for last words.
Oh, thank you, Dan. I do not need to be crying up on here because you say all these nice things. My last word to the emergency management community, and they're probably not dying tomorrow, but knock on wood, but is truly that the work you're doing is so important and the recognition of it is not there right now. So all of you need to work together in this way that Dan has talked about, in sharing a voice to raise the vibration. Because if you don't get to the point where you control yourselves, we're going to lose a lot of you, and we're not going to get new people. At least we're not going to get new people who are devoted. this will beat the servant heart out of everyone. And that's the biggest heartbreak that I could ever have here, is to understand that the people that I so admire in the EM practitioner community, I admire all of the EM community, all my high ed colleagues as well, but my heart lives with the practitioners who labor tirelessly, often with no budgets, no respect. They just have to fight every day to do all the things they know are the right things. And it is endlessly frustrating to see that and to understand that with on their shoulders are populations. With when Dan is working, he has a population he's carrying with him that he's working for. We are so critical. And when I say we, the EM practitioner community is so critical to the health and well-being of our country, our communities, our homes, our families, everything. Because when a disaster happens, it doesn't just happen in the community. It comes right down to the person. It comes right down to your own individual well-being. So that's our scope, right? It comes from the individual, goes all the way out, and then comes right back down to that level. It's a huge job, and too often thankless. And I'm sick of that part really bad, the thankless part. But at the end of the day, I will say what I said to Dan. When it comes to professionalization and EM becoming a profession in the way it deserves to be a profession, like law and medicine, I am all in for you all. So you only have to reach out. I will continue to fight for that matter, even though I won't be at all the conferences and doing all the other fluffy things I used to do. I will still continue to do that for all time. Thank you, my friend, for giving me this opportunity.
Absolutely, it was my honor. I will share the resources that you had mentioned throughout the podcast, especially the articles and other things on the topic. Uh, Thank you again for everything you've done. Thank you again for the mentoring you've done with me, the inspiration you've given me throughout my career. And ultimately, just thank you for taking the time. I know you're a very busy person and you spent the summer with your grandchildren. You're doing all these things. I just appreciate you giving me your time, because your time is your most valuable resource. For everybody out there listening, thank you so much for taking the time. You'll have those links. Reach out to Carol if you ever need anything. She is available on LinkedIn. I see her active on LinkedIn. Whether or not she's available, I don't know. That's a different story. But overall, this is Theory into Practice. I'm Dan Scott. Let's get better and let's do it together.